Welcome to the fascinating world of woodworking. Today, we'll dive into the process of creating incredible works of art from wood. How do we turn a simple log or plank into a true masterpiece? Let's see how trees of giant proportions are cut and what tools are used to process them. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already to make sure you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Wood can be used to create not only furniture, but also entire art installations and sculptures that impress with their scale and expressiveness. This process is quite challenging. From selecting the materials to the final touches of varnishing, every stage of the process requires great attention and a creative approach. When cutting and shaping with a chainsaw, the artist considers not only the desired form, but also the natural properties of the wood, such as texture and internal structure. The carver chose this stump to create a dragon figure. First, he uses a chainsaw to give the wood a rough shape. You can see how the silhouette emerges, the head and torso. The root system is perfect for making claws. Using a grinder allows for the creation of fine details and gives the sculpture smoothness of form. Each stroke adds the necessary contour and details. Rotary tools and hand instruments are also used to refine the sculpture. It's meticulous work. The final touch is the application of varnish. It not only protects against pests and moisture, but also in the moment when the sculpture acquires its individual character and expressiveness. Varnish enhances the texture and colors of the wood, adding depth and shine. To produce boards from smaller diameter logs, there are also special machines available. The log is fixed onto a conveyor line. Special rollers with teeth slowly feed the wood forwards towards several metal saws that cut up the wood. The blades can be spaced at different distances to obtain boards of varying sizes. This process can take anywhere from mere minutes to up to an hour, depending on the length of the log. But in the end, we get a perfect cut. It's somewhat reminiscent of special bread slicers seen in supermarkets. In the USA, in Tulare County, it was decided to cut down a giant sequoia. It was damaged by a forest fire and the trunk of the tree was severely burnt. So it was decided to remove it. The size of the sequoia is impressive. In diameter, it reached approximately 14 feet. Lumberjacks seemed tiny against its backdrop. To fell the tree, workers began to saw off parts of the trunk with chainsaws. This is not an easy task, as the tree is truly massive. The wood needs to be cut into small pieces. Trying to make a regular cut, the chainsaw blade would simply get stuck under the weight of the trunk. Axes and mallets were used to chip away at the wood. To make sure the trunk fell in the right direction, the tree was gradually cut from the necessary side. Safety ropes were also used during the process, attempting to guide the tree in the desired direction upon falling. Special pneumatic rifles were used to hook the ropes onto branches, firing a rope from them. It took only 10 hours of continuous work over 2 days to fell the sequoia. The giant tree trunk fell with a lot of noise. It was felled in such a way as to prevent the sequoia from damaging other trees upon falling. To create a wooden sculpture on a log, the future silhouette is drawn out first. This master decided to make a bird, so he took a chainsaw in his hand. For everything to succeed, the wood must be of good quality and without voids inside, otherwise the sculpture will not turn out. First, the master forms the rough silhouette of the bird. The wings are the most challenging part. He should carefully carve the feathers so that the wooden bird looks as realistic as possible. After the chainsaw, smaller tools can now be used to add finer detail. The master uses various grinding machines. Depending on the complexity of the work, he chooses either an angle grinder or a belt sander. Eyes and beak can be painted using a drill and special wood attachments. Although everything seems to happen quickly in the video, in reality it can take up to more than a day. The figure now needs to be sanded and coated with varnish. Now it can be adorned in someone's home, garden, or yard. This man here is making paper using the traditional Chinese method, just as it was done thousands of years ago. First, he manually collects enough bark from suitable trees. It should be flexible and not too dry. Such bark is easy to peel off from the trunk and roll up. Then the man removes the dry bark and moss with a knife and divides the soft bark into thin strips. This is easy to do by hand, as it tears into fibers. The strips are placed into a special container, and starch, ash, or other substances are added. Everything is poured with water and left to soak so that the bark softens. After a few hours, the water can be drained, and the strips are taken to the river to be thoroughly rinsed. After soaking in hot water, the bark breaks down into fine fibers. They are rinsed again and taken into a special furnace, where the water is heated. The bark is boiled until it darkens and resembles ropes. It is then spread out in the open air to dry. Fibers that were dark brown and soft after boiling become almost snow white and dry. They are collected and taken back to the river. They are moistened and then beaten up with a special tool. This requires requires quite a bit of effort. The fibers are soaked again in special reagents and placed in the furnace for heating. After this step, they seem to resemble spaghetti. Anything unnecessary is removed by hand, and the bark is ground into a homogeneous mixture using a special homemade machine, just like in ancient times. The mixture, in consistency, resembles dough. It is now placed in a bag and taken back to the river for another rinse. The bag is attached to a stick and swished around in the water. The mixture is transferred to a special tub, where it is finely ground and stirred with sticks. The water should resemble milk. It may take a long time to ensure there are no lumps left. Glue is made from the bark, which resembles maple syrup in appearance and thickness. It is also added to the tub and stirred. On special bamboo mats, the white mixture settles, forming future sheets. They are carefully removed and stacked. The paper is sent under a press with stones to remove excess moisture. The sheets are carefully separated and hung on wooden boards to dry completely. After several days of work, traditional Chinese paper appears. This is how paper of enormous size is made. The same methods are used for small-sized paper, but here it's impossible without a production facility and dozens of workers. To immerse a special mat into the container, 40 people are needed. They work in harmony. They dip the giant frame into the tub with the mixture several times and then pull it out to let the water drain. When the mat has accumulated enough thickness of sediment, the paper sheet is pulled out for drying. Such sheets of paper are used for creating art installations, huge paintings, and even maps. Felling a giant tree in the desired direction is quite a complex process. Everything needs to be done correctly. The trunk of the tree is cut from one side. To start tilting it, a special wedge is driven into the cut. A small wedge is enough to tilt the tree just a few degrees in the desired direction. This is usually sufficient for the tree to fall in the intended direction. When the lumberjack sees that everything is going according to plan and the trunk begins to tilt, they release the chainsaw, which was trapped during cutting, and step away. In a moment, the trunk, weighing several tens of tons, falls to the ground. Then it can be cut up into smaller logs. From wooden planks and epoxy resin, you can create unique designer tables. This man used 2 planks. With the help of burning and special tools, he can give the surface the desired texture. Epoxy resin is mixed with dye and poured for the first layer. When it solidifies, decorative moss and stones are placed on it, after which another layer of epoxy resin is poured. Next, the table is sanded to remove any irregularities and polished to shine. The craftsman burns his logo into the wooden part of the table. Metal legs are attached to the tabletop. They are sanded and coated with a layer of lacquer for shine. LED lighting is attached to the bottom. Would you like such a table? Write it down in the comments below. Wooden wheels for carts can still be made today using traditional methods, just like they were crafted back in ancient times. This man from India employs simple hand tools to make a wooden wheel. First, he creates the central hub, drilling holes for the future wooden spokes using hardwoods for strength. He crafts the spokes using axes and chisels, requiring 10 for each wheel, which are then driven into the hub. Glue can be used for extra strength, but it's not always necessary if the assembly is done correctly. The rim is made from wooden arcs, which are attached to the opposite ends of the spokes. Since the crafting is done manually, each step requires careful verification of hole placement, often measured by eye. Holes are then drilled in the arcs, the only modern tool the craftsman uses. To ensure longevity, a metal frame is made from the wooden base. To fit in place, it's heated until red hot and then quickly affixed into the wood. The heat causes the wood to smoke and ignite, so the craftsman has only seconds to complete this step. Once the metal ring is in place, the fire is extinguished with water. A rubber tire is then fitted onto the metal frame. This process is repeated 3 times and the cart is ready to use again. Lumberjacks here now are felling another tree of impressive size. To make it fall in the desired direction, they have cut a triangular section of the wood. After this, they start sawing the trunk from the opposite side. It's not always necessary to complete this cut. Under its own weight, the tree gradually begins to tilt in the desired direction. When a crack is heard, it's time to step away to a safe distance until the tree falls. A fascinating idea for a designer table. On the wooden base, the master marks curves. Using a grinding machine, he begins to cut out indentations of various sizes. The grinding machine helps smooth out all the irregularities, resulting in a lot of dust and wood rot. Making such a table is not easy, because there are many details. Its surface resembles a sandy desert or soft fabric rather than hard wood. By putting in a lot of effort, a wave-like surface is achieved. The surface is then coated with a special lacquer, but using such a table may not be very convenient. Due to the wavy design, special mounts are installed in its corners on which a glass tabletop can be placed for comfortable use. A great solution for your own home or office. Such tables are significantly more expensive, but many people are willing to spend a lot of money to have unique designer furniture in their homes that will amaze guests. The same master not only makes designer tables, but also proves that wood can be used to create true works of art, not just practical items. The master decided to make a decoration from wood in a similar technique that could be hung on the wall. He again marks the block of wood. If you have any good imagination, you can create truly impressive things. The man begins to cut away wavy shapes. During the work, he changes the attachments on the grinding machine several times to achieve different shapes. Sawdust flies in different directions. It wouldn't hurt to protect your eyes with special goggles, but the master knows what he's doing. He checks with his hand whether the surface is perfectly smooth and blows everything away with a stream of air. To obtain an unusual color, the wood is charred in the necessary places. The process is reminiscent of painting a picture. The artwork is coated with a layer of lacquer, resulting in a wonderful installation that perfectly complements the room's interior. If you ever wanted to experience what it's like to be a lumberjack climbing a tall tree, this video is for you. It shows the process of gradually cutting down a tall tree. The worker has secured himself at the top of the trunk and carefully saws the tree with a chainsaw. Special harnesses and small platforms attached to the trunk help you to stand securely at the height, even with several safety ropes. It's quite dangerous, even with safety measures in place. Choosing the right position is crucial to ensure that the log falls in the opposite direction and doesn't injure the worker. Many people suffer serious injuries during such work, so safety precautions shouldn't be overlooked, especially at heights of over 20 meters. It's also important to be careful not to injure oneself with a chainsaw while holding it with one hand in such a position. One must also ensure not to accidentally damage the safety rope. When the cut is sufficient, a lumberjack pushes the log over with one hand, and it falls right on down. Would you dare to take on such work? Share your thoughts down in the comments below. Making an unconventional and useful item out of wood is certainly a crafty endeavor. Take for instance a convenient organizer. A craftsman constructed the base from wooden planks, connecting it with 3 circles. Using a pneumatic gun, he securely fastens the main elements together. In the sections formed, various elements can be installed to create spaces for storing various small items. These wooden elements are glued together using special adhesive. Curved wooden borders are installed onto the base, and a special mechanism is inserted into the bottom to allow the structure to rotate conveniently. At the top, a hook is attached for hanging the organizer when needed. Finally, it needs to be varnished. Just look at how the color of the wood changes afterwards. Now, the organizer can be used for storing various tools. It's a great addition to any garage or workshop and looks much better than a plastic case. What a great idea to make a cup out of bamboo. Using a saw, you need to cut a section of the stem to the appropriate height. It's important to remove the green part and sand the base well. You'll also need a special piece of bamboo for the handle. It also needs to be cleaned and sanded well. Small holes are cut into the base into which the handle can be inserted. By securely attaching the handle, a great and environmentally friendly cup is created. It can be made in less than an hour with a minimal set of tools. When it's necessary to cut down a tree growing in a yard, it should be done carefully and gradually to avoid damaging anything when it falls. So first, all the branches need to be cut, leaving just the bare trunk. Such a tall tree needs to be sawn from the top down. For this, the lumberjack climbs up to the safety ropes and using a chainsaw, cuts the trunk into small logs. The cut should be made slowly, without rushing, to ensure that the log doesn't fall prematurely. Each piece is secured with a rope to prevent it from falling from a great height. When the stump barely holds on, the workers can push the remaining part of the trunk by hand or pull it with a rope, while staying down below. This is the most dangerous moment. Notice how the log swings down and around the trunk and almost hits the worker. A blow like this can knock someone off their feet, or the log or its fragments can severely injure a person. Then the log is slowly lowered using a rope. The lumberjack descends lower, and the process is repeated until the trunk is cut into small pieces. This is how you can make a round recess in a wooden block. You'll need a circular saw and a bit of effort. Fix the block in the center so that it can be rotated around one point. Begin forming the recess with cuts. This is the simplest and quickest way to make a perfect recess. This method can be used to create a great stand for a favorite ball, a bowling ball, or any other round object. To transplant a tree from one location to another, there are special machines for uprooting. They are suitable only for trees of certain sizes and types though. A special mechanism captures the trunk in a ring. Several mechanical teeth enter the ground, acting like shovels. This allows for the plant to be dug up from all sides and pulled out of the soil, causing minimal damage to the root system, as the soil and small roots around it need not be pulled out too. After this, the tree can be transported and planted in a prepared pit. Some mechanisms also dig around the tree to easily lift it from the ground. This is done by a mechanism resembling a saw. Such equipment is used in forestry when it is necessary to transplant a suitable tree to the desired location. From a wooden block, one can create wheels for a toy car or a souvenir. To do this, the plank is mounted on a lathe and given a perfectly round shape. Afterward, a hole is carved inside, similar to a real tire. Using a drill, the surface is then patterned to mimic tire treads. Due to the friction, the wood may begin to smoke, so speed is essential. This process is repeated 3 more times before moving on to the discs. These can be crafted using hand tools. The craftsman carves out all the intricate details before assembling the pieces, adding a coat of lacquer for a finishing touch, resulting in excellent wheels. To cut down trees of regular size, special equipment is used. These are logging tractors with attached machinery. The machine can enter the forest in search of the desired tree. A special mechanism securely fastens the trunk, and a saw cuts it near the base. After that, using rollers, the bark and small branches are stripped away as if with a razor. The trunk can then be cut into logs of the required length. This process takes less than a minute, whereas doing it manually would take hours, even with powerful chainsaws. Some machines first cut the tree near the base, and then the mechanism grabs the tree before it begins to fall. This equipment is used to quickly clear the forest of damaged and dry trees, as well as to perform timber harvesting tasks. The craftsman embarked on making another sculpture from a tree trunk. The log was so large and heavy that he managed to lift it with the help of a special elevator. He measured the required length of the log and cut it with the chainsaw. The master marks lines to make it easier to trim away the excess wood. He shapes the future head from the top. At the initial stage of carving the sculpture, he performs rough shaping. Gradually, using the chainsaw, he cuts out the future silhouette. Can you guess who this man wants to make? Write it down in the comments first. At first, the head becomes visible. Now we can outline the torso for cutting. This requires considerable experience and a good imagination. Some masters work with wood directly, without any drawings, but this requires considerable experience. So, to ensure the sculpture turns out as you envisioned, it's better to make a sketch. You probably already guessed that the man decided to make a sculpture of a bear. He carefully carves the arms and legs, small cuts can mimic fur, and after this, the figure is sanded and burned with a gas torch. To make the sculpture more realistic, a part of the nose is left unburned. The main thing is to not overdo it to avoid burning the sculpture. Using fire, you can achieve a dark color of the wood without paint or lacquer. From a plank, he cuts out a sign, "Welcome," for the bear to hold and greet guests. A wonderful sculpture for a home or restaurant entrance. This machine is used to create perfectly smooth cylinders from wooden blocks. Operating on the principle of lathe, the machine securely holds the block from both sides. A special motor starts rotating it at a high speed. Meanwhile, a blade slowly moves along a special rail, cutting away the excess wood and forming the cylindrical shape. Sawdust flies in all directions, so it's better to wear eye protective goggles and respirators, although these workers often neglect their safety. Eventually, what emerges are round beams that can be used as piles, furniture parts, or in construction. This machine is used to process the trunks of fallen trees, making them convenient for transportation in trucks and trains. A special excavator grabs the trunks with its claws and places them into the wood processing machine. It removes all the unnecessary parts, such as dry bark and remaining branches. An automatic chainsaw cuts the trunk up into pieces of the required length, significantly speeding up the work. Doing this manually would take many hours, but this equipment allows the heavy work to be completed in just a few minutes. Some machines can process multiple trunks at once, cutting off branches and sawing them into pieces. Besides being used in forestry, similar technology is employed in construction, furniture manufacturing, and timber harvesting facilities. It enables quick and efficient wood processing, after which it can be loaded and transported to its destination or undergo further processing. To fell a tree, you don't necessarily need a chainsaw. Beavers can easily handle this task. These animals gnaw trees to build their nests and dams. They also feed on bark. Often, these creatures become real pests, destroying dozens of trees along waterways. They typically go to work mainly at night. This night vision camera captured a beaver gnawing away on a tree trunk. It does this slowly and gradually. These animals have extremely strong teeth, much stronger than those of humans, and they grow continuously throughout their lives. So even if the animal has enough food or no need to build a dam, they still need to gnaw on trees to wear down their teeth. This beaver gnaws at the wood in various places and periodically listens for any cracking. When the beaver hears that the tree is about to fall, it quickly starts to flee to a safe place. The man who left the camera was surprised in the morning when he saw the fallen tree. It's hard to believe that in just 2 or 3 nights, one small animal can gnaw through a large trunk. The next night, the beaver began to work on the neighboring tree. Therefore, in some areas, efforts are made to trap these animals to prevent them from destroying plantings. This massive mahogany tree was cut down by several lumberjacks using chainsaws and sent to production. Mahogany wood is highly valued. It is used to make expensive furniture and decorative items. It was delivered to the factory where it was cut up into smaller pieces using large chainsaws. With the help of a lift, it was transported to a special machine where it was sliced into thin discs, several centimeters thick. To prevent the wood from overheating during cutting, it is watered. Markings in the form of circles were made on each disc, and they were cut into smaller pieces manually using a circular saw. Each piece was clamped into a special fixture and cut into a circle using a router. This is not an easy or pleasant job. Just look at the efforts this man puts in. Moreover, he has to be wet and covered in sawdust because the wood is watered to prevent it from overheating and being damaged by friction marks. Afterwards, they were sanded to make them perfectly smooth. Thus, a beautiful kitchen cutting board was made. Just look at how strong the mahogany wood is. It doesn't get scratched by a knife, so it can be used for cutting meat. Even blows from a hammer cannot leave dents. Would you like such a cutting board for your kitchen? Let me know down in the comments. To convert a large log into boards, a special semi-automatic machine is used. First, the log is secured. The mechanism with the saw begins to trim the wood. Since the log is quite large, the machine can't really reach all areas, so excess wood has to be removed with the chainsaw. A special mechanism gradually rotates the log until the unevenness is removed. After this, the boards can be cut. The operator sets the required thickness and the machine starts cutting the log. After some time, a smooth wooden block remains, yielding many boards. Such material is particularly valuable. It is used to make various furniture or in construction. Each board then needs to be sanded. They are passed through a special machine for this purpose. Moving the boards has to be done manually, so it is quite heavy work. The finished material, however, is stacked and left for some time to allow the wood to naturally lose moisture and prevent deformation. With the help of electrical current, the craftsman plans to create an unusual masterpiece from this board. To achieve high conductivity, the surface is moistened with water and a high current is passed through it. It burns the wood, creating indentations. The burn patterns resemble wood grain or algae. Epoxy resin is mixed with blue dye and applied to the surface. Excess resin is then removed, and when it fully hardens, the surface is sanded and polished to make it perfectly smooth. Look at the fantastic lightning-like patterns that have been achieved. The outlines burned by the current are noticeable at the edges. This board can be used as a fully fledged decorative element by hanging it up on the wall. It can also be used as a tray or a stand. This man is engaged in furniture making. To avoid buying planks and boards every time, he decided to purchase a special machine and now makes them himself. All he needs is a high quality log and a little effort to trim away the excess, shape the wooden beam, and cut it up into boards of the required thickness. Not all wood is perfect. In the trunk of this tree, there was a huge colony of ants. This part is unusable due to the voids, so it is simply cut off with a chainsaw. The rest of the log, however, is perfect, so it can be cut up into boards. The main thing is to not forget about personal safety and to protect your ears. The sound during sawing is not pleasant, so it's worth wearing good headphones. From this tree stump, they decided to make a dragon sculpture. It weighs several tons, so special equipment is needed to lift it. They cut it in half. They start forming the contours from the suitable part. They cut off everything unnecessary. This process is similar to slicing a cake. For the craftsman, it is as easy as cutting butter, although in reality, a lot of effort is required for such work. The head and torso of the future dragon are already visible. Several people work on creating the sculpture simultaneously. They use grinding machines to carve out the details. A small drill can create indentations and various contours. All irregularities and jagged edges need to be carefully smoothed out to ensure the surface is even and pleasant to the touch. It's easier to carve the dragon's scales by hand using chisels and hammers. These are hundreds of small details that are carefully carved onto the wooden dragon's body. With the help of a chisel, hemispheres can be made. The sculpture is coated with lacquer. To make it multicolored, different types of lacquer are used. For example, transparent lacquer is used for the whiskers and mane, while a darker yellow is used for the body. Just look at the detailed composition that has been achieved. There are even several small jaggins around the large one. What impressed you the most? Go ahead and write it down in the comments section below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. You'll find plenty of interesting videos there. Stay with us and see you at our next meeting.